Let's talk about selling in person because that can be quite awkward at times if you've never done it before. And there's a few things that I think will set you up for success. Doesn't really matter where you're selling at, whether that be at home, at a craft fair, or literally if you have your physical products in a store somewhere, because a lot of people like to sell their stuff on consignment and things like that. So that's kind of the idea here. So selling in person, I never had a physical location. So I would have people that would want to come and look at physical products at my house. So there's a couple of ways you can do this depending on how you feel comfortable. But I'll tell you what worked for me. When people would want to come and see the product before they bought it, I would literally have it staged inside my house. And so we didn't keep a lot of product on hand ever during when I was making a lot of stuff locally. What we would do was if I had an end table, I would made this end table for somebody else. They haven't picked it up yet. I would take pictures of it, get good product photos, and then I would post, hey, I'm making these now. So I'm adding to my portfolio like we talked about earlier. And then when they come to see the product, if they wanted to see it, I had several people want to come see the product. I would literally have it staged up in my home. If it was a coffee table, it would be in the living room. I would move out my other stuff. I would invite them in, show them the table, let them look at it, look at the finish, look at everything about it. Like they could shake on it, make sure it was sturdy, that kind of stuff. End tables, dining tables, the whole nine. I had this multiple times. They would come literally inside my home. Now, it's up to you if you feel comfortable doing that. But my wife would stage them up. In other words, put plants or centerpieces on tables, things like that, make them look like we are literally using this product. So what that does is it puts a mental picture in the customer's eye that lets them see it in their space, essentially. It's the reason why when people are selling homes, you've heard of staging a home for selling. It may be an empty home. Nobody lives there, but a realtor will go in a lot of times and put in furniture. Why? Because it elicits that emotional response. Remember the branding? It elicits that emotional response, and it helps them see the product or see themselves in that home. They start envisioning their furniture, where the furniture's at, and things like that. So there's a purpose behind the staging. So if you're selling in person, I encourage you to do something similar to that, because if they just walk into your shop, unless you have, the most amazing, beautiful piece ever, thinking river tables with some type of unique feature. I toured a old logging sawmill in North Arkansas, and he was making a river table. It was in his shop. They were still working on it, and it had like Civil War era bullets lodged in the wood, and you could see them. That's a cool story. Like I could have, that could probably sell something. But just having a dining table in a shop, sawdust everywhere, it just doesn't really set the mood. If you can stage them, I highly recommend it. Now, if you're selling at craft fairs or on a consignment in a consignment shop, I highly recommend what you do is take a little time to do some market research. If it's inside a consignment shop and there are other products in there kind of similar to yours, or even the products of like wood products people are selling, go spend some time in that consignment shop, like decent amount of time. Just walk around and watch people. Watch where they go, watch what they're looking at, what they're picking up, what they're touching, and figure out what is drawing them to that product or products, because there's a reason why they're stopping there. If it's cutting boards, if it's smalls, end tables, stuff like that, it's drawing people's attention for a reason. Are they buying it? Or are they just looking, they look at the price and then they walk off? That tells you that they don't agree with the price. See how many people are doing that. That's going to give you a good idea on what's really pulling their attention in. What I like to do is, if you're going to do that, go there, watch the people do it. And when they walk off, if you get 2 or 3 people within an hour or 2 hours or however long you're there, and you get multiple people stopping at this place or this booth or this setup, go over and take a picture of it and figure out take it home with you and study it and figure out what's drawing their attention to this thing. Is it well staged? Is it different? Is it unique? Is it made different? Is the contrasting colors? Like, what is about this product that's really drawing people in? Because there's a reason why they're stopping. Another thing you can do, especially if you have stores like Kirkland's or IKEA or any of those type stores anywhere close to you. The closest one to me is 90 miles. And me and my wife literally did this. We drive to Little Rock, 90 miles away, just take a day, and we go out to lunch, and she does a little bit of shopping, but we would go to Kirkland's. And I would literally watch people walk around the store. And then when they stopped at that table, I would be like, why are they stopping at that? Is it the design of the table, the color combo, a little bit of both? Take some time and figure out what people are interested in, because these stores like that will put out products that are trending in style, and that matters. And look at who is stopping there, because who is stopping there matters a whole lot. If you're in those furniture stores too, you can do the same thing at furniture stores. If you go there, 99%, well, not 99, but 95%, like a very high percentage of the customer is women. It's just a national fact. You can Google it. Like, it's a very high percentage. I don't know if it's 95, but it's well up there. The buying person, the one making the buying decisions in the home, is primarily women. And so if you know that going in, you know who your customer is going to be primarily, unless you're making like mallets or other type things that are really focused toward woodworkers, which is primarily male. There are females there too. But, you have to kind of balance who your customer is and know who that is so you can know how to set this stuff up. So that's what I would do. And then if you go to craft fairs, walk around, pay attention to which booths draw the most attention and why. Why are they drawing the attention? Is it a unique product? Is it the price? I mean, if they're selling stuff dirt cheap and everybody's just buying it, it's really not a good business model. But typically what's happening is there's a product there that causes people walking by to stop. Something's catching their eye. Maybe it's the way it's set up. Maybe it's the staging of that product on that booth table. There's a reason. There's always a reason why people stop. So keep those things in mind when you're selling in person. Now, as far as exchanging money, stuff like that in person, I would highly recommend you setting up something like a Stripe account. You can take payments over your phone. Is it Stripe? Square? Square does that, Square payments. There's other services out there that you can literally have a little device on your phone and take those credit card payments. And then also, I always, no matter if it's online or in person, when I take an order, it's always 50% down before I start the project and 50% when the project is complete. And the reason for that is they commit to buying your product, which basically covers probably the supplies. It should cover at least the supplies and some of your time. And then at the end of the term, they have a certain amount of days. I always did like 7 days to pick it up because I don't have room to keep it. So they know these terms going forward. You can text them back and forth. You can draw up a small little contract, have them sign it, you sign it, so that they know what they're getting. And you're going to deliver it by this date. Like, you have to have some constraints in there too. But when you take that payment, take 50% down, 50% at completion. And what had happened was, when I was starting out, I had a acquaintance order a flag from me. I built the flag. I put all the finish on, all this time and effort into it. And when it come time for him to pick it up, he said he wasn't going to get it because there was a conflict of interest. Basically, he was a fellow police officer, and my daughter at the UAM campus, a little college campus here, and my daughter literally got run over by a professor in a crosswalk, hit her. She rolled up on the car. She's fine, but she was a little bit injured, broke her laptop, hit her pretty hard. And so because of that incident, he wouldn't buy the flag. I was like, what does that have to do with you ordering a flag from me? And so anyway, he wouldn't do it. So I was stuck with this flag. And so I ended up having to hold on to it for a while and sell it. So that's why I always recommend you always, always, always get a deposit up front. I don't care if it's friends. I don't care if it's family. If they're friends and family and they're buying from you, they shouldn't have a problem giving you a deposit. If they do, then they're probably going to have a problem paying you at the end. So just protect yourself, get a deposit, and then taking money. Again, I would do some type. You can do PayPal if they want to PayPal it to you, or Venmo or Cash App or any of those things. You can have those things too. Having a way to get credit card transactions is also a good idea. And I try to avoid cash as much as possible unless you want to write them a receipt book. But at least with digital transactions, there is a paper trail there. The only drawback to that, if you don't trust the customer, especially with like PayPal, things like that, they're really customer focused. So if they sent you money for a product, they can always claim they didn't get it. Most people won't do that, but you do have to kind of take that into consideration. But that's kind of how we always did selling in person versus online, which is next. So selling in person is probably most likely going to be a lot of people's first dive into selling products. So how do you do that? Well, a lot of people will utilize friends and family first, which is not a bad idea. It's really not. The first customer I ever had was a friend of my wife's. We posted something on Facebook, and I delivered it directly to her face-to-face transaction. So that's probably going to be most people's entry into the woodworking business. They'll wind up selling something that was to a friend or a family member, and that's a good way to get started. I would actually recommend, if you can do that, it's probably a good way to do it. Now, as far as building relationships and selling to local people that are outside your norm, there's a few avenues that I found very interesting that people have utilized this to their advantage. And especially if you live in it doesn't really matter, because here I'm going to get into it. So a lot of people like, if you're making cutting boards and smalls, charcuterie boards, things like that, they'll make several up and then go to their local realtors. You've probably heard about this. If you haven't, it's a good idea. You go to your local realtor, say, hey, I make cutting boards. You're selling houses. You can give these away to your clients. It really helps build an emotional response. Remember that branding. You can kind of pitch them the idea that they're branding themselves as the go-to person, because they get a little extra when they sell the house or buy a house. The person gets a little extra. So there's been some very big businesses made on this premise. They go to all the realtors in their local area. It doesn't matter if you got 1, 2, or 20, and just hit them up and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is the cutting board. Take one with you. Take the finished product with you and say, hey, I'm making cutting boards. We can get your logo put on there if you got a laser or anything like that. Or if you know someone with a laser, they can put the logo on there. And that will help. It helps the realtor, and then it also helps you. And then it also helps the customer who bought the house, because now they have a brand new cutting board to go along with their brand new house. Like, it's a really cool idea. Another idea is, a friend of mine lives in the Fort Worth area. He goes to a steakhouse. I think I told you this. He orders a steak. They bring it out on a cutting board, and it was really a poorly done cutting board. They've been running them things through the dishwasher. They were broke up, and it looked like crap. So he told the guy he could sell him cutting boards. He comes back a day or two later and shows him the cutting board versus the one that they're using. He said, I can sell them to you for this price. They'll look better. It's more presentable. It's just an all-around better thing, And the guy winds up ordering multiples, and now he goes back and resurfaces those every couple of months. He'll sand them down flush, flat, put new finish on them, and take them back and refurbish. So he's got that business going. So that's a good way to start generating some income locally, because you just start thinking outside the box like that. Like, I would have never thought to go to a place like that. If you have local places that make charcuterie boards at restaurants, that's another good thing. I went to a charcuterie place in Nashville, Tennessee, and they brought out the charcuterie, and the board looked like trash. It was just old. It was just faded looking. It just wasn't a good presentable item. If I lived there, I would go and say, hey, I make charcuterie boards out of solid walnut and use food grade finishes on them, or food safe finishes like Outlaws board builder or whatever it is, and tell them, you know what, here it is. This is, bring it with you. Like, say, hey, this is really good. So talk to the manager or whoever's in charge. And that's just a good way to start opening up business opportunities for you. It doesn't have to be cutting boards or charcuterie boards. It could be literally any product you're making. Figure out who could benefit from that product, and you two could team up. You might could sell it to them at a little less than what you normally sell it to as the public in general, but that just really opens up some doors for you to start selling stuff. Now, yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. It's a little nerve-wracking, especially if you're like me, you're an introvert. It's very hard to put yourself out there, but we're starting a business here. We're not trying to, do some public speaking, but what we are trying to do is get our business in the hands of others. And there's only really one way to do it, and that's to kind of put yourself in uncomfortable positions. And I've had to do that multiple times over the years. I'm a severe introvert. Seriously, like, I don't like talking to strangers or approaching people or asking for directions or any of that stuff. And so I'm very, very, very sympathetic to how that probably makes a lot of you feel. However, this will open up a lot of doors for you that you never thought possible, because if they get a cutting board from you, right? Maybe the realtor gets a cutting board. What else do you make? Or the restaurant, they get that cutting board or charcuterie from you. What else do you make? If you have a portfolio, like we talked about earlier, you're building that portfolio up. You have multiple either variations of the cutting board or the charcuterie board or the furniture that you're making. So there's a lot of opportunity there when you start trying to sell in person. You just have to be willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And that's part of it. So that's part of growing a business, and that's what I think you should probably start trying to do. Put yourself out there, let's build something. Another option I touched on earlier is selling at a consignment shop and or something similar to that. So there's a place here locally called the Marketplace, but I've seen a chain of these that are very similar called, I think it's called the Painted Tree. You can Google that. It's basically, they've set up, they rent out buildings or lease buildings or make buildings, and then they rent out booths of products. And one booth might have like fashion jewelry, and the next booth might have slab tables, and then the next booth might have kids clothing. And it's basically, my wife loves these places. And so if you know who your customer is, you know has the buying power in the house, who makes the buying decisions, then you know you have to go where the customers are at. So if you see one of these marketplaces like this, go and look and see what's inside that. Now, if there's zero woodworking stuff in there, in other words, no end tables, dining tables, cutting boards, charcuterie boards, like anything that's wood product based, and there's no booth in there, maybe an opportunity for you. But there also may be a reason why. So kind of feel out what's going on in that store. Now, if there's other furniture stuff in there, then there's an opportunity there. Spend some time in that store, watch and see what people are doing, what they're making, or what purchases they're making. And then it might be a good opportunity for you to sell in person while you're not even there. So you're literally having a physical product in someone's store, and that's a great opportunity. And I think that if you look at these opportunities to start selling your product, you'll be amazed at how many that are out there. Just when you set that product up, you want to make sure it is staged properly and it's not just thrown in there messy. Because I have seen those in these booths. I'm walking around and there's like a stack of cutting boards, and there's no real rhyme or reason of how they're laid out. Like that's kind of, I don't know, it's counterproductive because it's too confusing to the customer. They don't really know what's there. They can't really see it. They can't envision it. You're not eliciting an emotional response, not a positive one anyway. And so you kind of look at that. Now, also keep in mind that other men are in there too with their spouses. We're talking about in the majority. So what can they buy? So if you're a woodworker and you have a booth somewhere like that, a good idea is to also have a few things in there that interest those type people. Because I know I've been in several and I've seen slabs. Like if you've already got a slab that's flattened and you're not going to use it and it's dried properly and it's ready to roll, I've seen several of those in these stores along with those woodworking or wood projects or products. So that's a good idea. You could sell those. Just put a price tag on it. They take a commission off of it when you sell, depending on the store. And then also like mallets and other things that you can make in your shop that would appeal to them is a good way to kind of start adding a little bit to your portfolio and maybe bring in a little extra income. It's just an idea. I would check my local area and see if there's any of those. You could probably search Painted Tree locations. They would show there's several of them around. I've seen them. I've seen one in Nashville, I think, one in Little Rock. And so I'm sure there's multiples of those type stores around. Just consignment shops, basically higher end consignment shops. They're not, there's some that just sell a bunch of used stuff. I probably steer clear of that. People in those type areas, your customers there are really looking for a deal. And so if you're not wanting to sell bottom dollar, that's probably not a great idea to generate profit, but I would absolutely look in those locations.